Welcome back to the Lonely Star, listeners. Today we're diving into a figure who's inspired awe and fear for centuries, King Solomon. The research you found for this is really something else. We've got the classic biblical stories, but also, well, let's just say some pretty wild alternative takes, and even some stories about him messing with demons.
Mm.
So where do we even start with a figure like that?
The thing that jumps out at me is just how differently Solomon is portrayed depending on where you look. In some stories, he's the ultimate wise guy, literally blessed by God, builder of the magnificent temple, ruler of a super rich kingdom, like the poster child for a golden age.
Right. But then you dig a little deeper and you find these like shadows lurking beneath the surface. There are hints he might have seized power pretty ruthlessly, maybe dabbled in forbidden magic. There are even these whispers about human sacrifice and how his personal life might have brought the whole kingdom down. It's almost like we're dealing with two different Solomons.
It really does seem that way, yeah. So we'll definitely cover the traditional story, the wisdom, the connection with God, the whole temple saga.
Yeah.
But we also have to shine a light on those darker corners, the stuff about demons and hidden agendas and whatever else we find in those less official historical and apocryphal texts. Fair warning, folks, some of this might challenge what you think you know.
Okay, so let's ground ourselves first with the story most people know. Solomon inherits the throne from his father, King David. But our research suggests it wasn't exactly a smooth transition. There were other contenders, like Adonijah. What was the situation there?
That's a really important detail. Adonijah, being an older son, probably had a pretty strong claim to the throne, at least in the eyes of some. And from what we've gathered, not everyone was thrilled about Solomon taking over.
Mm.
It kind of paints a picture where Solomon had to, assert himself pretty quickly, make sure everyone knew who was in charge.
Right, and then we have this incredibly dramatic scene, this dream where God basically says, Solomon, ask for anything you want. And what does he choose? Not wealth, not military power, but wisdom, so he can rule his people fairly. It's a powerful image, and the promise that comes with it, behold, I give you a wise and understanding heart, one like none before you have had, nor anyone after you will ever possesses, really sets the stage for his legendary status.
No doubt about it. That divine gift of wisdom becomes the foundation of Solomon's whole image. It's the idea of a ruler who prioritizes justice and fairness for his people over personal gain.
And that leads us to one of the best known examples of his wisdom in action, the story of the two mothers and the baby. You know the one. Can you remind us how Solomon handled that impossible situation? Our research includes this rather chilling line about his solution. Cut the living child in two and give half to each woman. Sounds pretty brutal, to be honest.
Yeah, it does sound harsh on the surface. But think about it. He's faced with two women, each claiming to be the mother. What Solomon does is actually brilliant. By proposing the seemingly cruel solution, he's forcing a genuine emotional response. The real mother, desperate to save her child, cries out, "Give her the child, but please don't kill him." And that instantly reveals the truth. It's wisdom applied to a deeply human situation, cutting through lies to get to the heart of the matter. Why do you think this story, out of all of them, became so central to how we understand Solomon's wisdom?
Maybe because it's so universal, so primal. The love of a mother for her child is something everyone can relate to. And the way Solomon finds the truth is so surprising, so unconventional. It's like, oh, wow, didn't see that coming. And then, building on this foundation of wisdom, we entered this period of incredible prosperity, marked by ambitious construction projects. And of course, the big one, the temple in Jerusalem. This was a massive undertaking involving an alliance with King Hiram of Tyre. What made that partnership so crucial?
Well, Tyre was famous for its resources, especially cedar and cypress wood, which were ideal for building. Plus, they had these super skilled artisans, stonemasons, woodworkers, all the top craftsmen. Solomon's kingdom, while growing, probably didn't have the same level of expertise or access to those specific materials, so it was a win-win. Hiram supplies the resources and know-how. Solomon presumably offers something valuable in return, maybe trade deals or military support. It's about combining strengths to achieve something truly grand.
And this wasn't just about putting up a fancy building. This was about fulfilling a divine purpose, right? According to our research, God makes a very specific covenant with Solomon concerning the temple. If you walk according to my statutes and follow my commandments, I will fulfill my covenant with you, and I will dwell among the people of Israel. It's a huge promise, but there's this catch, this condition attached to it. What's your take on that?
It's crucial, that condition. It's like saying, yes, the temple is meant to be this physical representation of God's presence, a place of worship and connection. But it's not unconditional. This favor, this divine blessing, depends on Solomon and the Israelites staying true to God's laws. It's a reminder that even with all the wisdom and grandeur, things could fall apart if they stray from the path.
Mm.
Makes you wonder if, later on, Solomon really truly understood the weight of that promise and the consequences of breaking it.
So then we come to the dedication of the temple, a landmark event. It's described as this incredible moment where God's presence actually manifests. I mean, can you imagine being there? The awe, the power.
The accounts talk about this dense cloud descending upon the sanctuary, so thick that even the priests couldn't continue their rituals. It was seen as a clear sign that God had accepted the temple, taken up residence, so to speak. It firmly established the temple as the heart of Israelite religious life. And it must have given Solomon's authority a huge boost.
And beyond the religious significance, Solomon's reign is remembered as this golden age of peace, prosperity, and trade. The Queen of Sheba's visit really captures that, doesn't it? Traveling all that way to see Solomon's wisdom and wealth for herself. What do you think motivated her? Pure curiosity.
Honestly, I doubt it was just curiosity. The Queen of Sheba was probably a powerful ruler in her own right, so her visit likely had political and economic angles as well. Think of it like a diplomatic mission disguised as a quest for knowledge. She's sizing up Solomon's kingdom, assessing their strength, maybe looking to forge alliances or trade deals. Those lavish gifts she brought weren't just for show, they were part of a bigger strategy.
All right, so that's the traditional glorious Solomon. But as we hinted at, our research also uncovered a darker side. Let's start with how he came to power. One source calls it a ruthless power play, specifically pointing to the deaths of Adonijah and Joab. That doesn't exactly sound like a divinely ordained succession. How do we reconcile these two very different versions?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? These sources suggest that Solomon's hold on power wasn't just about God's favor. It was about strategically eliminating threats. Adonijah had tried to usurp the throne before, and Joab, David's top general, was a powerful figure. Removing them could be seen as a shrewd, maybe even ruthless way to solidify his position. And I think maybe the traditional narrative glosses over these less pleasant details.
Then there's Solomon's, shall we say, colorful personal life, the infamous 700 wives and 300 concubines from all these different lands. Those marriages might have started as political alliances, but our research suggests they had a pretty profound impact on Israel's religious landscape. There's this telling quote, "Finally, Solomon gave in. He built a shrine for Ashtoreth. He raised an altar to Milcom, and he constructed a sanctuary for Chemosh and Melech." Doesn't sound like the Solomon we met earlier, the one devoted to God.
You're right, this is a major turning point. These political marriages, while initially useful for diplomacy, ended up bringing foreign gods and practices right into the heart of Israel. Solomon, maybe swayed by his wives, starts compromising the very faith that defined his covenant with God. He's building shrines and altars for deities like Ashtoreth, Milcom, and Chemosh, which directly contradicts the commandments. It makes you think, what is it about power that can corrupt even the wisest people? And, no surprise, this leads to divine judgment. Our research cites God's words. "Because you have turned away from me, I will tear away what David placed into your hands, yet I won't do it in your lifetime. I'll bring it upon your son." So while Solomon enjoys his reign, the seeds of trouble are sown. It's almost tragic how someone who asked for wisdom ends up here. It's a pretty stark irony. This judgment foreshadows the kingdom splitting apart after Solomon's death, a direct result of him breaking the covenant. It's a reminder that actions have consequences, even for a king blessed with extraordinary wisdom. And the fact that his son will bear the brunt of the punishment adds another layer to the story.
And now we enter a whole new realm, something out of a fantasy story almost. We're talking about apocryphal legends that link Solomon to the occult. The Testament of Solomon claims he had this magical ring given by an angel that allowed him to control demons and force them to build the temple. We even have mentions of a pentala and the name that cannot be spoken. Where did these stories come from, and what are they trying to tell us?
These apocryphal texts, they're kind of like the unofficial spin-offs, not part of the main biblical canon. But they offer a totally different perspective on Solomon's power and how the temple was built. It's not just human effort and God's blessing anymore. Now we have Solomon with this magic ring, often described as having a pentagram-like symbol, probably the pentala they mentioned, and the super-secret powerful name inscribed on it, the name that cannot be spoken. This ring supposedly gives him power over demons, whom he then forces to do all the heavy lifting, literally in building the temple, quarrying stones, carving details, you name it.
It's wild, right? Completely different from the traditional account. And there are even stories about specific demons, Horus, Beelzebul, who Solomon bosses around, making them do things like hewing stones and sawing marble. It's like a supernatural construction crew. Were these demons portrayed as pure evil?
Not always. Many of them are depicted as causing all sorts of problems for humans, but Solomon, using the ring and that secret name, can subdue them and make them do his bidding. The stories often show him questioning these demons, learning about where they come from, how they mess with humans, even getting glimpses of heavenly secrets. It's not just wise King Solomon anymore. It's Solomon, the demon-commanding cosmic warrior, wielding this incredible supernatural authority.
And the occult connections don't stop there. We have the Seal of Solomon, the hexagram, which has this whole history of being associated with power over spirits in occult traditions. It's amazing how Solomon's name has become so entwined with these esoteric practices. Why the hexagram specifically?
The Seal of Solomon, typically shown as a six-pointed star, two triangles intertwined, has become a big deal in all kinds of mystical and occult traditions. It's linked to protection, power, controlling spirits, the idea of balancing opposing forces. And because of its connection to Solomon, this legendary figure who could command demons, it's even more important in those circles.
But then our research gets into some pretty unsettling territory. There's this question: did Solomon secretly participate in these rites to gain forbidden power? We're talking about human sacrifice, offered to gods like Moloch, Chemosh, and Ashtoreth. It's a disturbing thought. Is there any historical evidence to support these claims?
These are definitely dark possibilities raised by some of the more critical interpretations out there. They're mostly based on reading between the lines of certain biblical passages and combining those with apocryphal stories and later traditions. The Bible criticizes Solomon for building altars to these foreign gods, but these more extreme theories suggest he went further, maybe even engaged in human sacrifice. It could have been a way to gain power within these cults, to appease these new deities he was acknowledging. Who knows? It paints a very different picture than the wise, God-fearing king.
And then there's the idea that the temple itself had a hidden purpose, something beyond just being a place of worship. Some suggest it was built with secret mathematical and spiritual codes, maybe even functioning as a portal to other realms. That takes us into a whole new level of interpretation, doesn't it?
We're definitely getting into more speculative territory here. Some theories say that the temple's design incorporated sacred geometry, specific mathematical ratios, and cosmological principles. Maybe it was a way to encode deep spiritual truths, or even create a link to other dimensions, other spiritual realms. These ideas often draw from esoteric interpretations of the Bible, ancient architecture, and the belief in hidden knowledge that's been passed down through the ages.
And then there's the Ark of the Covenant, not just a holy relic, but possibly an ancient technology, possibly even a source of immense destructive power. Sounds like something straight out of an Indiana Jones movie. What's the thinking behind that idea?
It takes the idea of the ark beyond just representing God's presence. It suggests that it had a real, maybe even technological function. They point to stories in the Bible where the ark causes death and destruction. Combine that with theories about lost ancient technologies, and you get this image of a device whose true purpose was either misunderstood or hidden on purpose.
And it gets even wilder. We have legends about secret chambers within the temple filled with hidden scriptures, magical artifacts, and non-human knowledge. It's like this ancient treasure trove of forbidden secrets just waiting to be rediscovered. What kind of knowledge are we talking about here?
These stories really fire up the imagination, don't they? The idea that the temple held this vast collection of hidden wisdom, maybe gathered through Solomon's supposed dealings with supernatural beings, inherited from past civilizations, or protected by secret societies. We're talking lost religious texts, advanced science, maybe even knowledge about the true nature of reality, non-human knowledge, suggesting it's beyond what we can normally comprehend.
And this ties into the whole mystery of Solomon's wealth. The Bible talks about him being incredibly rich, but as one source points out, none of this treasure was ever found after the Babylonians destroyed the temple. Where did it all go? Was it looted and lost, or is there a more intriguing explanation?
Yeah, the vanishing of Solomon's legendary fortune has spawned tons of theories. Some say invaders stole it all. Others say it was hidden before the attack. Maybe they knew it was coming. Then there are the more out there ideas, secret societies, supernatural forces protecting the treasure. It adds another layer of mystery to his whole story.
It's fascinating how Solomon's name keeps appearing in these grimoires, magical texts, and esoteric traditions. One source even wonders if his power is still shaping the world from the shadows. It's a pretty thought-provoking idea. What do you make of his lasting influence in these circles?
Well, the fact that Solomon's name pops up again and again in these traditions tells us something. It shows that people have long seen him as this figure who possessed deep magical knowledge and power. Whether that's rooted in reality, exaggerated legend, or just symbolic association, is a question that continues to fascinate people who are drawn to the occult. It speaks to our enduring fascination with the idea of secret knowledge and ancient power.
Do you think it's possible that Solomon's pursuit of wealth, power over spirits, and this hidden knowledge was all an attempt to transcend humanity itself? That's a pretty big and maybe dangerous ambition. What would drive someone to seek something like that?
It's a fascinating interpretation. It suggests that Solomon wasn't just content with earthly power. He was aiming for something more, maybe a kind of enlightenment, immortality, or a power that blurs the line between human and divine. And if that's true, it might explain why he was willing to dabble in those darker practices. Maybe he was ready to cross any line to achieve that ultimate power.
And it seems like it all ends on a rather melancholy note. Solomon's last years are marked by enemies rising up against him, and our research indicates God stopped communicating with him directly. Then there's his reflection on the futility of worldly pursuits in Ecclesiastes. It's almost like a cautionary tale. What's the message here?
Absolutely. The later part of Solomon's story, even in the traditional version, shows what can happen when you stray from the right path. Enemies emerging, the feeling that God is silent, it points to a loss of favor. And then Ecclesiastes comes in with this poignant reflection on how empty worldly achievements are if you're not grounded spiritually. It's a reminder that even the wisest and most powerful can fall.
So we're left with this puzzle, this clash between the divinely blessed, wise king and this potentially ruthless, occult-obsessed figure. How do we even begin to make sense of these contrasting portrayals? Is there a way to connect them?
It forces us to confront the challenges of interpreting history and the fact that truth can be subjective. Could those biblical accounts have been influenced by human biases, political agendas, or a desire to craft a specific religious narrative?
Hmm.
Or are the apocryphal stories just made-up fantasies or maybe reflections of later anxieties and fascinations projected onto this enigmatic figure? There's a lot we don't know, a lot of gaps to fill.
This whole journey through these different narratives really makes you think. What is wisdom? How seductive is power? And what is it about figures like Solomon, who straddle the line between the sacred and the profane, that continues to captivate us? What resonated most with you in all this? What questions are you left with about Solomon and his legacy?
For me, the biggest takeaway is just how powerful the Solomon myth is, how it continues to be reinterpreted across different religions, historical periods, and esoteric traditions. It speaks to something fundamental in us, this fascination with wisdom, power, and the hidden world. And the question of whether his pursuit of knowledge ultimately made him better or worse, well, that's something we can all ponder.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of King Solomon. It's been a thought-provoking journey for sure.
Absolutely.
Be sure to join us next time on The Lonely Star as we explore another intriguing mystery.
Until next time,
Goodbye for now.
the truth is stranger than fiction.